and I'm going to give you a little more detail with him, because I've been involved in a lot of school practice. The interns that I train, I require them to build relationships with the schools that the children they're treating are involved with, and then to build partnership between the school and family. Now, Twemlow argues that part of the problem is that there's a lack of an integrated systemic approach to bullying. So there's not really an attempt to change school climates. Usually what schools do is they want more security. So they're more cops. So if you go to any high school in LA, there's a cop car parked right in front of the school. School police are very busily giving kids tickets. And unfortunately, really pushing them into the probation system. There's a sense of hopelessness. One of my interns just went to a school, and the teachers just said to her, you know, what's the point? The kids here don't care. 60% of them are going to fail. This is what they're telling me. And she was amazing. She went back and she said, well, this kid here is not going to fail. This kid is my charge. We're going to have a meeting. All you teachers are going to meet with the mother, and we're going to sit down, and guess what? Several months later, this kid is succeeding. It was unbelievable. She had one teacher that was on her side, and we started to build on that relationship. And what we discovered was that the therapist was lifting the morale of the teachers. This is the impact we can have on the system. She's amazing. She's a Korean American that I've been trying to get more Korean American interns in my, because we're partly in Koreatown. And I developed a bilingual cohort where I have also bilingual, bicultural Latino interns. So about 5 of those are bilingual and another 5 are not. So what we're finding is we need more and more bilinguals. That's the population shift with the numbers. There's poor training of the adults and the educators. They don't even know how to recognize kids that are kids. Has anybody seen the film Bully? No. So what did you think of it?
It was fantastic.
I haven't seen it. I just heard an excerpt from it where there's I think it's an assistant principal trying to get one boy to shake hands with the guy who just bullied him. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So it's not like, you know, I mean, it sounds like it was a woman, right, I believe, right?
It was.
Yeah. So she's trying to get the kid who's got just bullied to shake hands with the bully and make up. The kid says, I'm not going to do that, right? And you know, he says, this guy just put my face on the wall. I'm supposed to shake his hand. The teacher, the vice, whatever it was, assistant principal says to him, well, now you're acting just like him. Unbelievable. What about blaming the people? So we need to train people. They just don't understand what they're doing. They're basing their reactions on some other templates. And as I mentioned earlier, there's too much focus on physical safety. There's a lack of attention to adult bullying of children. To children who bully adults. And guess what? Some kids do bully teachers. And then there are parents who bully teachers. So there's a lack of attention to a real cultural climate that we have of people seeking to dominate other people. And that's where the focus needs to be. So in summary, what Twemlow says is, look, we've got to attack this in a systemic way. He has a manual, by the way. You can actually get online. If anybody's interested, let me know. I can email it to you. And then he says we need to focus on the psychology of the bystander. Some of you who study social psychology know bystander behavior is really dangerous. People assume that because other people are there, that they don't have to do anything, someone else will take responsibility. The famous Kitty Genovese case years ago, a woman was killed right basically in front of everybody. We knew, we're hearing the screams, and no one did anything. And so psychologists have made a big deal of it, but he's like, well, we're certainly not. So what Twemlow says is we've got to figure out a way. He by the way, has a whole theory about bystander behavior, about projection and introjection. So that often bystanders are actually getting vicarious thrills from seeing someone bullied. So it's the guy or the girl who says, let me hold you down. And is really inflaming the situation. And then there are bystanders who are also playing out their own victimization. So he sees it really as a really powerful unconscious process, projection and projection, and bystanders actually vicariously experiencing some of the bullying victim kind of thing. So he distinguishes between destructive bystander behavior versus helpful bystander behavior. And then what he does when he goes into schools, he begins to try to train people to understand these dynamics and to take responsibility. So what happens is if bystanders begin to challenge bullies, they stop. So he actually created a song. It goes like this. Back off, bully, get out of my face. Everybody needs their personal space. Do your own thing, get off my case. Did you ever notice that trouble comes in threes? The bully, the bystander, and the victim. That's me. The bully needs attention, the victim gets hurt. The bystander just watches and doesn't say a word. Shame is the bully's game. The victim takes the pain. Bystander, you fan the flames. We don't like the bully game. And all you have to say is back off, bully. So he teaches this to kindergarten through sixth graders. And it's a way of getting to their right brain and really beginning to redesign the whole notion of bullying and understanding bullying and victimization and so on. He says that what he's trying to do is to really impact the young in these school systems, to create what he calls a mentalizing or reflective capacity. Basically, to get us out of action and acting out mode, procedural memory to get us to reflect on things, and to foster intersubjective collaboration. He doing what I try to do, to connect schools with homes. You've got to get those parents involved in schools. There's often an enormous professional prejudice in those parents. And it's, of course, class differences, middle class teachers, and poor families. And you've got to teach these systems about the power of the unconscious. All right, any reactions, questions so far? Any thoughts, associations? Yeah.
Did you see the thing on the news where it's the autistic kid who was getting picked on? The dad wiretapped him at school?
Oh, no.
Yeah, boy who's like 10 years old, autistic, and he was acting out, and the dad didn't understand why, and so he put a wire on him. Went to school, and it was actually the teachers who were saying mean things to him, and like even called him a bastard, and they were like talking about getting drunk the night before in front of him, and like,
yeah.
And they didn't fire that teacher either.
Yeah, this is what's incredible. I had one of my interns was an ex-cop, and wonderful guy. He's 25 years on the police force, and wonderful connection with boys, particularly. He did great work, but he didn't have a clue about this. I'll give you an example. So apparently I was on vacation one week, and the following week he came into supervision and he says to me, I did this thing while you were away. It was a mistake. What had happened was this. He had a little boy patient who was obese. And the little boy came in and complained in therapy that the gym teacher was picking on him and teasing him about his weight and so on. So my therapist supervisee tells the little boy, okay, I'm going to train you to be assertive. So he sends his little boy back. And of course the gym teacher suspends him. Trying to tell the gym teacher, don't do that to me. In a way, that's therapist bystander behavior. This is where the dyadic intrapsychic crap gets you in trouble. We're bystanders, basically. We're seeing social injustice. We're seeing stuff we can actually intervene. That's why I require interns to go to schools. Okay? I don't send kids to solve their problems. That's what we're here for. You know? I tell kids that. I actually tell kids, what's the point of having an adult? What are they there for? Really? What are adults for? You think about it. It's unbelievable. So I got him to do the right thing, and here's what he did. He convened a meeting with the principal. He had the boy's father go to the school, and they had the gym teacher there. That's what happened. The gym teacher fell on his sword. He said, I'm sorry, I did it. And the principal actually said, you know, you really messed up because I used to be that fat kid. So that's the advocacy, that's the systemic work. And what's interesting, my intern, being a cop, he says to me, wow, I arranged the chairs in the right way because I was afraid the father would bleed on this guy and choke him to death. So he was bringing his talents, his police talents, to the intervention. And I got to tell you, it was an amazing, amazing result. the father got more involved. The father had the boy join a soccer league. The father would walk every morning now. The father had custody of the kids. It was the mother that had been problematic in child protective services that separated her from her children, which we get a lot of. It's, a lot of fathers actually like that. Yeah.
So George, before you came in, we were talking about the cultural complex, and it seemed like in terms of applied psychoanalysis, it gives a space to be able to understand the social material in a movie like The Hunger Games. So, which seems to be appeal to teens in one way because it represents the way they feel that they're being sacrificed by the society in various ways for the entertainment value and for the parents to get paid off in some sense.
Exactly.
And you see that in, I had a student recently write about toddlers and tiaras and things like that, which is a sacrifice, existential sacrifice there. So the teens, they're also into vampire movies. That's another thing. Vampires and the Hunger Games is the thing lately.
It's a huge.
And magic, but so all these things represent an aspect of the psyche that's alive in the teens, and so.
But it's a socially constructed psyche. So right, I think that's what you're alluding to, right? So teens are disrespected and used by adults, either through projection or actually how we frame them, that they sacrifice their lives for us. We have a society that struggles with really respecting kids. There's a book called Childism. If we're interested in figuring out how much prejudice we have against kids.
Well, it's archetypal too, in that even back to the Lost Boys, there's a theme of children who are being, Peter Pan, the children that are, the children as a group, archetypally, psychologically, have to go through a period of transformation into adult, which involves a kind of death, a sacrifice of that culturally.
Yeah, really interesting.
Well, and I'm piggybacking on what he said because I don't know the story of the movie or the books or anything, but what I thought it was when you said if they were being punished for a failed rebellion. So I think of that as like our society right now with people are trying to take a stand, yet when they do, they're thwarted.
Yeah, it's really
and that starts, I mean, it all trickles down, so the kids go, why? Why should I?
Yeah, but it starts with Winnicott's idea of holding, for example. That dialogue between infant and parent. Is the parent responding to the infant's rhythms, or is the child having to accommodate the parent's rhythms? And that's what Winnicott meant by holding. The parent actually creates an environment which is responsive to the child, facilitating to the child. Do you have your hand up somewhere?
I was just going to say, I mean, it's interesting to me how that dynamic, that sort of secular dynamic of, why should we care about the students? Or if I'm going to be punished for this, why should I attempt to succeed?
Right.
It's kind of fostering this bystander behavior in all of us as a community. And I mean, just in terms of having a kind of somatic experience, when you said that thing, I noticed my heart just kind of sink. This sort of feeling of that we're all responsible in a way. We all sort of stand back and watch our children behaving that way or moving in that direction. It makes me feel really heavy. So
It's really, well, that's what Matt and I have been discovering with social dreaming. I mean, the voicelessness, people's feelings of helplessness, while showing in their dreams these depictions of children being assaulted, abused. It's extraordinary. Unconscious is trying to tell us about this.
It was a very powerful image of the bystander in the audience in the Hunger Games. The people are just beside themselves watching this spectacle. That's quite disturbing. I gave an assignment to a class of Pepperdine to go see the Hunger Games and then write.
Wonderful. Oh, that would
as an extra credit. I got 3 back. 2 were, one was pretty good that I'll share with you. I wish I could remember the
Oh, that's a lovely idea. We should be doing more of that.
But one said, very interesting, he says, I don't know why you're surprised at this, just turn on the news.
Yeah.
Because you see kids killing kids all the time.
Just amazing.
And what they hold, what Jung said is that the child archetype holds the notion of futurity for the social collective. So in a sense, it's not just about the kid. It's an expression of the collective unconscious through the film that's saying that we've just been disconnected or dissociated from our own potential for futurity and generativity that is captured in the child archetype. So there's an archetypal attack on the potential of human spirit to grow and to respect the growth, and it kind of represents where we are in terms of a collective depression about the future, apocalypticism, and so on. So it's not just about kids too.
It reminds me of Ferenczi. Ferenczi wrote a paper on Freud's death wish. And he said, Freud, you're wrong. It's not that people are born inherently with a death instinct. He said it's that kids are not welcomed into the world.
Can you repeat that again?
That kids are not welcomed into the world. And so it's the child's identification with this hatred that comes up.
And the child in us that's not welcomed into the world. That's
exactly.
in the adult death instinct.
And so it repeats intergenerationally.
Yesterday I was teaching personality 1, and my students pointed out that there's a lot of movies like The Hunger Games with destruction, but there's also a lot of movies about babies.
Yeah.
And and the new birth and the child. So both polarities are coming up right
Well,
now.
that's at the heart of what we struggle with. We are extremely cooperative and often have enormous acts of altruism. I mean, that's one of the things that inspires me. I go to a school and I find teachers who care deeply. I find principals who care deeply. And on the other hand, I find people who are too identified with what Fairbairn called the internal saboteur, do to themselves and do to others. Yeah.
There's also, on the opposite side of the spectrum, if you guys watch that show, What Would You Do?
Oh, I love that show.
It's something new that's come about that focuses on, unexpected situations and seeing.
Yeah. Well, I love the bystanders on that show.
Yeah,
They're
and I think
unbelievable.
that it's really.
They step up.
Yeah, it's evoked, this passion in people to, I think our culture kind of tells us to, mind your own business, do your own thing, everybody's an individual, don't get in anyone's business, but it's kind of brought this culture of, we're a community, if something's wrong, appropriately step in, or do what needs to be done to help.
It's really interesting. And yet it seems like there's a global phenomenon going the other way. So in China, a child gets almost killed in public, right? I mean, crazy stuff is happening. What you expect in China, that bystanders would care for a child in public. That's sort of been the cultural norm. There's been a kind of pulling away. But that show is amazing. I mean, you see people stick up for race, stick up for homosexuality. And there are, I don't know if people have seen it, they just had bystanders in a restaurant listening to actors act out some kind of either homophobia or racial kind of insult. And these folks were just sitting there, hear this stuff, and they step up and say things. It's really quite amazing. Someone else had their hand up,
I almost don't want to say it, but I'm still a teacher. 7th grade middle school, and I love my kids, and my kids do really well. And we do respect each other. And we're reading The Giver right now about a utopian society. They tried to make one, but it became a dystopia. It's very disturbing to them, so I have them write and create their own utopia. And what is their example of a dystopia? And a lot of them said, this society is a dystopia. But then you have the other side, and they said, this society is a utopia.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, so depending
it's full
on...
of goodness and so complex. Let me talk a little bit about I guess one way to think about it is that there are basic psychoanalytic concepts or science about human groups that I think are critical if you're going to do any community psychoanalysis. Let me just talk about the idea of group regression. If you study family systems, you know about Bowen's idea of societal regression. It's very similar. The idea is that under stress, systems regress, people regress. The psychodynamic group, I guess, literature really exploded with Bion's contributions around small group behavior and stuff. And in his view, groups struggle all the time with anxiety. Just look at any group. I once did focus group with psychologists, Actually, the focus group psychologists and probation officers. I wanted to figure out why they couldn't collaborate. And the psychologist actually said to me, psychologists are the problem. On a scale from 1 to 10, they said psychologists are a 2. They're afraid of groups. This is what they saw in their colleagues, lots of anxiety. But generally, it's true. Most people are afraid of groups. Groups are scary. Groups are really destructive. Groups have dynamics of exclusion and inclusion, triangles and subgroups.